thank our panel as well.
my laws, my tax, my
controlling our borders. I also think that being part of the European Union
and financially catastrophic and ineffective European Union.
Well, thank you very much. I've had my blueberries and yoghurt this morning, I'm afraid, and my kale, but it balances out with the iron root. Listen, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks to Brodies, thanks to the Sunday Times for inviting me along. I'm really pleased to be on this panel as well. John, somebody I've hugely admired, although take different positions on a number of things, and we'll come to that, but hugely experienced business entrepreneur, and Michael Moore has that rare quality, somebody who was a politician that was respected across the political field, and for very good reason for that. So it's always a pleasure to share a platform with him as well. So a great pleasure to be here. I was told before we started by some of the guys at the Sunday Times that they've held a few of these sessions, a couple of these sessions throughout the country, and they said the Edinburgh audience were a bit quiet. And I says, don't worry, the Glasgow audience will be a bit of a stare-here-drammy. So I built you up, so I'm hoping that there'll be some fireworks. And I think John got us off to a pretty decent start. I really enjoyed John's presentation. He said, I want to retain Britain's heritage. I want to run our own affairs. He said, I want us to have control of our own tax. I am British. This is going to sound strange from an SNP guy, but stop being such a nationalist for a second if you can, John. Because my argument for this is actually very different to John's. It's not one to plead with your heart. Although I'm pro-European, I make no apologies for it, unashamedly so. It is not actually an issue to do with me from my heart. My European identity is probably quite a bit down there. I'm Glaswegian first, I'm Scottish, Celtic supporter, and then somewhere way down the bottom kind of comes in perhaps somebody who has a European identity. So for me, it's not really an issue about identity. And what I'm going to say next is not going to be much of a surprise to you either. My preference would be that Scotland was an independent country in its own right at the European top table. But I obviously know that is not the case and not likely to be the case in the immediate future. We have the constitutional setup we have, and whether we're in the United Kingdom in Scotland or whether we're out with the United Kingdom, it is better for Scotland and the UK to stay within the European Union. But I don't have a romantic attachment to that. I don't wrap myself up in the European flag. As I said, my identity very much is one as Glaswegian, as Scottish. I take a pretty hard-hearted and cold-hearted, and I take a pretty rational view on these things. I kind of look at the cost-benefit analysis. I weigh it up. I look at Europe, certainly have some disagreements about how Europe operates. I certainly want to see reform of Europe. I think Europe can work better, particularly when we look at regulation, we look at businesses, and we'll come on to some of the discussion. But if I take that cost-benefit analysis, there's simply no doubt in my mind at all that the UK and Scotland benefits from its membership of the European Union. In the same vein, let me see that what you won't hear from me, and Michael alluded to it in his introduction of me, what you won't hear from me is the attempt to scare the living daylights out of you what will happen if the UK leaves the European Union. I don't think if we were to have a Brexit that the sky will fall in, that the earth will swallow us up, that the UK will not be able to survive, we won't be able to do trade deals. That is absolutely rubbish, of course. My simple argument is that these things become more difficult to do, and not only do they become more difficult, that actually the outcomes of those won't be as positive as they are with being within the European Union. Taking trade deals, as John was quite emphatic about, do I think the UK could do a trade deal with France, with Germany, with Italy on its own? Not a doubt in my mind it could. Of course, they could do trade deals. Difference of doing 53 trade deals as a medium-sized country as compared to the largest trading bloc in the world means that I think the outcomes of those would be different. But again, that's something undoubtedly we'll get into once we get into the thick of the discussion. For me, the European Union is about some of the economic advantages, and we'll get into the detail of that. The fact that almost half of our exports from Scotland go to the European Union, but on top of that, it gives our businesses access, as we know, to 500 million consumers, 20 million businesses. But more than that, I think it's not just about the economic union, as important as that is. I think the freedom of movement is a great thing for us here in Scotland, not only for the many Scots and Brits that live in the European Union, whether it's retirement villas in the south of Spain or whether it's students who study in French and German universities, but also from the other perspective too, from the European citizens that have contributed so much to their economy. Don't make any mistake about it. You talk to the Poles that are here, you talk to the French and Spanish and the Germans that are here, many of them
are here because we are part of the European Union and because of the advantages of that free movement of travel. And every study under the sun, bar none, shows that EU citizens contribute more to our economy than they take. On top of that, I think some of the social protections that Europe offers us are important too. As employers, many of you are, but also many of you here are employees as well. Many of you have benefited from things like paternity leave or maternity leave, from annual leave, from not being discriminated on the grounds of your gender, on the grounds of your race. And these things are protected by EU directives. In fact, the UK government only at the moment, in some of these directives, only meets the minimum requirement, the minimum threshold. So if it wasn't for those European directives, I don't know where those social protections may well be. I also think that being part of the European Union is important for some of the biggest global challenges that we face. I've been involved in the refugee crisis that we've seen. Over 1 million refugees that have come to the European Union over the course of 2015. And I think if we didn't have the European Union, then for Greece and for Italy to have to deal with that, those numbers on their own, I think would just be an incredibly difficult thing to do. So being able to work together against some of the most difficult common and global challenges that we face is incredibly important. So look, the European Union is a multilateral institution built up of 28 independent member states. Of course, it goes without saying, as I've already mentioned, that I would like Scotland to be there in its own right, but that isn't the argument that we're going to have. There's no point rehashing the independence debate. I'm happy to talk about the consequences of if Scotland votes to stay and the rest of European Union, UK votes to leave European Union. But generally, this is not about that debate. This is about, look, on a cost-benefit analysis, on that very hard-hearted look, as well as pleading to the hearts if you wish to do that. It's certainly not something that I think is going to win the argument, but I think looking at it, I think the benefits of staying within the European Union vastly outweigh some of the costs that are associated if we were to leave. So I look forward to a good debate. I look forward to a good discussion on this. And I hope that there's plenty of good questions that come. And don't be like the Edinburgh audience, be a bit more lively if you can be. So thanks very much.
I'd like to thank our panel as well.
My laws, my tax,
Controlling our borders. I also think that being part of the European Union
and financially catastrophic and ineffective European Union.